What happens after we die? It is an interesting question that I'm sure most of humanity has pondered since the beginning of time. For me, I imagine it like dreamless nights or the dark emptiness when fainting from an anesthetic, where we doze off to sleep without any sense of awareness. The only difference here would be that we may never wake up again, but rather forever become stuck in a state of limbo, where even the concept of time loses all meaning. Hey, my name is Neil, your resident existentialist. Today, I want to share with you my experience with mortality, what I'm doing about it, and some thoughts that you can consider in the future. The question of our mortality is quite a universal one. I think most people in their lives, at one point or another, have spent some time reflecting upon this conundrum. We were put on this earth without our consent, and we're told we have a finite amount of time to do something, which may or may not matter. And what happens after our time here? We don't really know. Many people have different values depending on their religious or cultural context, but there appears to be a lack of universal consensus. Just recently, I visited the Royal Ontario Museum, where they had a special exhibit about death. Besides the really interesting once-in-a-life opportunity to smell what a dead body is like, it smells really bad, I was able to see how different cultures around the world would exonerate their dead and how they viewed the concept of death itself. And although I think it's great that people can find closure through their cultural or religious beliefs, many people, such as myself, are ultimately still searching for answers. For us, there appears to be two possible conclusions. Firstly, pondering what happens after I die is a moot thought. I'm going to stop thinking about it and continue with my life. Or two, oh no, why am I still here? I don't know what's happening, and does my existence even matter? Not sure if it's obvious yet, but I belong to the second category. Whenever I think about something like this, I essentially devolve into a state of panic and existential crisis. Sometimes, when I lie in my bed with absolutely no work or responsibilities, I know it's very rare here in Appleby, my mind wanders and frantically tries to make sense of this paradoxical nature of existence. Consequently, I've come to the conclusion and made it a personal goal of mine to search for the meaning of life. Now, I know it might be too early to think about something like this because we're only in high school, but for me, look at the amount of gray hair I have. Yeah, I probably don't have a lot of time left. Seriously though, I know many of you sitting here have probably never thought about death because it seems so far away and that my speech is utterly useless. But I want to remind you that just as life is tenacious in one moment, it can be equally as fragile and fleeting the next. So, I have a sister who is 4 years older, and I was born in China. At the time, there existed something called the one-child policy, where every family was only allowed to have one kid. Some of you may see where I'm going with this, and you are correct. I was an accident. My parents did not want to give me up, so my mom tried to stay in the house for as long as possible to avoid detection. But someone, maybe it was a neighbor, reported my mom and she received a message from the government to do a pregnancy test at a hospital. Luckily, my mom was smart and sent her sister to do the test instead of her, and it somehow worked out in the end. But if they were to find out that my mom was pregnant, I would have been forcibly aborted, and Neil Yang would not be standing here today, imparting his wisdom upon you all. That is why I think our purpose as humans is one of the most fundamental questions that everyone must reflect upon. Obviously, I don't have an objective answer to this question, because if I did, I would be hailed as the world's greatest philosopher. So feel free to disagree with my speech or take it as you will. But I do want to share the story of my path to discovery. For me, everything began in my kindergarten years when a rabbit from my favorite cartoon died of old age. Instantly, my mind made the anthropomorphic connection of death in animals to humans, and I ran to my mom, distressed and teary, asking if she will die one day. At the time, although mortality was still too difficult for me to grasp, I did develop an intuitive understanding of impermanence. Life in of itself is fleeting, and early on, and like everyone else here, I'm condemned to a life of mortality, the date and circumstances surrounding of which are completely out of my control. No matter what we do, we're not going to change this fundamental outcome. As Benjamin Franklin puts it, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain, except death and taxes. Anyways, pondering our eventual end is quite frightening, and my emerging existentialist views led me to question whether any actions I took in my life truly had any meaning. Being in such a vulnerable and lost state, I turned towards philosophy, ancient wisdom written by people before me, hoping they can bring me my much-needed salvation. Philosophy is probably one of my favorite subjects. Here is Dr. Pennett's summarization of its definition. In essence, good people, philosophy is asking questions to questions that have no answers. Fantastic. Exactly what we need to find purpose in life, more uncertainty. But despite this apparently meaningless path of finding a meaning to life, realizing and accepting the pointlessness of it all can actually be quite liberating. From the countless philosophers I have read and attempted to understand, I have never fully agreed with any one of them. Bits and pieces I pick out sound logically coherent, but often provide an unsatisfactory explanation. How did I cope with a lack of answers? Perhaps the goal of finding meaning in life is ultimately futile. Yet, understanding this fact frees oneself from the pressure of having to find a singular, definitive meaning to life. No matter what I learn from these texts of bygone philosophy, the meaning I gain is ultimately my interpretation, which cannot be considered wrong. At this point, after understanding that there is no objective meaning to life, I'm once again left at a crossroad. There are three ways to go from here. One, continue to distract myself with experiences and sensations as an escape from this meaningless reality. Two, acknowledge the absurdity of my existence and wallow in its endless despair. Or hear me out. Three, if there's no objective meaning to life, then why have I not the power to imbue meaning to whatever I believe to be meaningful? Soren Kierkegaard, often regarded as the father of existentialism, supports a similar idea, which is one of the reasons I particularly enjoy the existentialist school of thought. Essentially, in the absence of objective meaning, each of our normative thoughts and judgments holds a value that is determined exclusively by each one of us. Whether it is political affiliation, or religion you decide to devote yourself to, or even your own sense of self, you alone hold the power to attribute meaning to each facet of your life. Hence, the passion you have for baking is just as legitimate as some grandiose ideal of creating a utopia. No longer are you shackled by preordained purposes determined by society or those around you. Sure, societal norms probably influence you, but your subjectivity is also equally relevant. Moreover, embracing the absurdity of our existence doesn't mean resigning ourselves to nihilism or anguish. On the contrary, it is an invitation to engage more deeply with life and to embrace its mysteries and its challenges with curiosity and courage. It's a call to action, urging us to create, to explore, and to live fully, even in the face of uncertainty. This understanding brings us to an old phrase: ignorance is bliss. The Old Testament in Ecclesiastes 1:18 also suggests, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Wow, doesn't that mean school is a place of torture then, giving us knowledge and grief, and my speech is simply adding to that suffering? I digress. Nevertheless, is remaining ignorant or oblivious truly the path to fulfillment? I will argue otherwise, at least from my own journey of self-discovery. The pursuit of knowledge, despite its potential to unveil uncomfortable truths, also opens the door to deeper understanding and personal growth. And it's this ability of introspection that allows us to make decisions that we won't regret and remain unwavering in what we decide matters in this world. Of course, I have practiced what I preach. Through much introspection, I've come upon my own goal in life. As I reflect on my existential musings, I acknowledge that what I know about this world merely mirrors my own subjective opinions. Everyone holds their own varying views, so how can we attempt to generalize these opinions to form objective boundaries to philosophical questions within society? In learning about different cultural views myself, I stumbled upon the concept of reincarnation, which I actually think is a really good motivator to be a good person. I know what you're thinking, but I'm not talking about karma or the idea that the effects of our actions will carry over to the next life. Rather, I believe the idea of the lottery of birth is more universal, where for everyone's next potential life, they can be born into any social class, race, or other predispositions, and all of it is up to chance. In such a hypothetical society, what is the most just ways to define its laws and rules? For this inquiry, I turn to John Rawls, another contemporary philosopher. What resonated most with me was his original position thought experiment that proposed a theoretically perfect society. In this world, rules and laws are established through discussions before anyone is aware of any attributes of their own identity. For example, how should wealth be distributed? Should 99% of money be consolidated into 1% of the population, or should it be more evenly distributed? Or should this society be ruled by a true meritocracy, where people's skills and talents determine their position in the social hierarchy, in contrast to a society with many social safety nets for the vulnerable? In our current society, people vote for policies that benefit themselves, rarely considering the effects on others. So typically, billionaires vote to lower taxes and working conditions to consolidate their own power, giving the rich and the powerful the most control over many policies. Now, let's imagine the same scenario in Rawls' ideal society. People create laws before people know what social class they'll be born into. This ideal society is thus eschewed from unfair advantages because in creating laws, people could potentially punish themselves once they're born. So because you don't know whether you're rich or poor, you probably don't want to create a society where the majority of people are living in poor conditions. Since that could be you. Take a moment to consider this thought experiment and separate yourself from your identities. What kind of world would you want to create and live in? Many of you might know me as a debater, a hobby I've become so fixated on because of its power to make my visions of an ideal world come to life. With each motion, I'm forced to argue from a predetermined perspective, regardless of whether that view is completely averse to my own. This type of discussion thus brings Rawls' theoretical experiment into reality, facilitating bias-free discourse towards an ideal society. If you also want this superpower, please join Debate Club and co-curricular next year. Anyways, bringing it back to our overarching theme, death. From this rabbit instance in kindergarten to fervent debates, my ongoing grapple with existentialism has taught me not only to look inwards, but also look outwards and leave an impression on the world around me. Through taking the time to think and explore uncertainty, I still don't have all the answers, but I feel fulfilled working towards my self-prescribed purpose. For the upper schoolers and senior ones, next year you will face many unique decisions that will shape your path in life. And for us senior twos, high school is soon coming to a close. I know, you guys will miss me. Dr. K, I know you'll miss my amazing contributions in your capstone class. But as each one of us enters the next chapter of our lives, our idea of purpose lies at the heart of all choices we make. And so, I urge you all to do some thinking. Reflect on the world around you, introspect, and contemplate your path in life. Ask yourself, what is your personal meaning? Thank you, and please stand to sing hymn 460.